Okay, well, good morning, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us, especially those guests joining us on Zoom, and most importantly, Jaime Alvarez, who is a photographer hailing from Philadelphia, but originally from Puerto Rico. Went to RISD, the Rhode Island School of Design, for undergrad, and then on to Cranbrook for his master's, and now is a professor at UArts, as well as, of course, a professional photographer. And we're just really lucky to have Jaime open up our art and climate change lecture series this semester. And we also have Stacy Brennan, the curator of education for the LUAG art galleries, the Lehigh University art galleries. And she's co-hosting, and the art gallery is co-sponsoring this lecture series. So thank you for that. And Stacy's going to tell us a little bit about the exhibition that's on view, right? Then the events, and for my students, extra credit if I see you tonight at the event. So take it away, Stacy.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Deirdre, for that introduction. And Jaime, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
As Deirdre said, I'm the curator of education for Lehigh University Art Galleries, your free museum on campus. This evening, 5 to 7 p.m., we have our opening reception for Gateway to Himalayan Art. It is also a celebration in conjunction with the Tibetan New Year called Losar. So hope you'll join us. We have lots of great food, music, and hands-on activities. And then tomorrow we will also have a community day workshop continuing the celebration of Losar, which the actual day of Losar is the 21st, coming up next week. So hope to see you there. We have tons of events throughout the semester and opportunities to connect with your interests and studies. So hope you'll take advantage of everything going on here at the Lehigh University Art Galleries. And it's all available on our website, and this recording after this presentation will be available there as well at www.luag.org. So thanks so much. I think it is time. We're going to turn it over to Jaime to take it away.
Hello, hi. Thanks for having me. First of all, Deirdre and Stacy, and nice to meet you, I guess. So my name is Jaime Alvarez. I'm a photographer based in Philadelphia. I was born and raised in Puerto Rico, and I didn't move to the United States until I went to college at the Rhode Island School of Design. Let me see where I start. So Deirdre Murphy shared with me the assignment that you guys will be getting, and she and I had talked. So apart from photographing, my neighborhood and everything, the other part of my job is photographing artwork for artists or institutions. So that's how Deirdre and I had gotten to know each other. So she had mentioned that she was teaching this class, and I think both our sort of backgrounds kind of like live in the same kind of world, I would say. So it was kind of nice to hear that she was going to be teaching this class, and yeah, so when she sent over the assignment, being that it's something that is like kind of like documentary nature, I was like, oh, this is kind of like right up my alley. So hopefully I can kind of share some of my influences, my experience, and if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Really good at like having a dialogue, or the more people talking, the better. But anyways, yeah, I'm gonna start on it because I have a ton of slides and we should get going. So let me see if I do this. Hit share, and then if I click on this, right. So can everyone see okay?
Yep.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So a little bit about me. Like I said, born in Puerto Rico. My art world I was very interested in being in the arts since I was pretty young, since I was a teenager. Maybe even before that, I took a lot of painting classes outside of school, and I was also very involved in like the theater set design world in my high school, which in the school that I went to, arts weren't really put first, so you really had to like kind of search for it. But it wasn't until much later that I got interested in photography. Um, with that being said, I think my world of like art and photography was totally, I think, different once like the influences that I had was totally different once I left Puerto Rico to go into the United States. Like I've learned so much more. And being in an academic atmosphere kind of like really taught me some things. So one of the big movements in photography that I kind of latch onto was this idea of the new topographics, and I'll go into the topographics as we talk, and show some examples later on. The new topographics were, well, it was an exhibition in 1975 at the George Eastman International Photography Museum up in Rochester, New York. George Eastman was the person that basically started Kodak. And you know, they have like a great photography collection. But the theme of the show was kind of showing like the man altered landscape. And it was in this very like kind of like straightforward documentary style. And the impact of the show was kind of like, or the purpose of the like the people photographing, I guess, we're kind of taking a step away from people like Ansel Adams and having these like really beautiful landscape photographs of like you know, like Yosemite or like everywhere else, like these beautiful like parks, and kind of like putting the camera more towards like the sort of the change that was happening out west in the landscape. And by that I mean like you know, they were turning basically areas of desert into suburbs that you know, filled with like sod, and trying like starting to like irrigate or bring water from different areas into these dry climates like Los Angeles, Nevada, Colorado, Utah. So well, I'll get back to that. So I was very interested in that. And while I was in Rhode Island, I learned about the view camera, which was like what a lot of these photographers shot with. And for those who don't know, a view camera is just like, it's a very large kind of camera, not as big as an 8x10 camera, but the 4x5 camera gives you a negative that's 4 inches by 5 inches. And it's highly like, it's a highly detailed negative that you know, you only get one shot, where before when you're shooting film, you know, you could only have either 25 or 36 exposures on one roll of film on your 35mm roll. This is like a one shot kind of thing. So you know, you pack up your sheets of film, you take your camera, you put it on a tripod, you go, and with purpose you like photograph something. So it's a very slow process and it's very intentional. So I started photographing like these kind of like really banal scenes of around Rhode Island, in different parts, and my interest was more as to like where sort of people and public spaces started mixing. So at first it was like, you know, like these people's homes with these kind of like, you know, whimsical kind of like topiary thing in the front, moving out into like nature a little bit, and then I started focusing on ballparks, like these sort of like neighborhood ballparks, and where they were located, you know, and the environment that they were located around. So um, very purposefully like set the camera to create these like compositions of like things in the foreground, um, what's in the background is kind of like divided by the fence, by the backstop of the baseball park or the baseball field. Now this is like sort of my my black and white large format class. So it's not like the best, not all the best like images right now, but I like to show it because it kind of shows like where I kind of came from and onto what I'm doing now. You can see kind of the difference. So always kind of just like how this like cage, you know, obviously like meant for like dividing sort of the play area and then the outside area, what's there for safety, but also like it kind of encaged what was outside of it. And again, very purposefully like um, composing the image um, to make this dichotomy, right? This is outside of this is in Massachusetts on the way to Boston. This is out in Providence, Rhode Island. Providence has like a big history in textile manufacturing. So you could drive around and see these like old warehouses, and right next to them would be these ballparks. This is like, there's a cemetery in the background there, and obviously the backstop fence like right in the foreground. Something a little more different is just like a soccer field, also in Providence. You know, really formal kind of like photographs. And you can kind of see the detail like of where the rest of like life happens and where like the play area or the like, you know, the sports activity happens. This was sort of my one of the kind of the last ones that I would photograph. I don't know if you can see my mouse in the thing, probably not, but in the center there's this large pole with this camera pointed into the highway, which I guess is the camera that's used for like seeing if there's traffic or you know, like maybe news channels can use it for showing what the conditions are for traffic, or maybe use just highway monitoring kind of camera. So like these issues of like not only just like where people live, but you know, you start getting into like maybe a little bit of surveillance stuff. Later on, this was this is one of the almost last images that I made before leaving undergrad, before leaving university. It started getting a little bit more abstract. And I also include this just because I really just kind of love this image where it was like, this is more objective, and then getting to this like kind of abstract type of image of like the mound kind of meeting up to like the retaining wall. The retaining wall, like almost creating like a pixelated sky kind of imagery. Like it almost looks like a dark sky, like a dark blue sky with like white clouds, and then this grass hill. So yeah, it's one of those things that it's like, I think I photographed it and I love this image. And it's not like the best image, like it's super gray. It's like the tones aren't the best or anything, but I wish I could recreate it. I've never been able to. So I'll hang on to it. So moving way past to I just finished at the Cranbrook Academy of Art, which is an amazing place where there's I think there's 11 majors now, like, or 11 departments now. There used to be 10. And it's a very small artist graduate program outside of Detroit. And in Detroit, you kind of saw a lot of like, or well, where I was living, I was outside of Detroit, but we would travel into Detroit, and this was during 2003 and 2005, or through 2005. and you could travel and you could kind of see like sort of the, like how if like the amount of properties that were just empty and available, the amount of land that was just kind of like torn down because the houses were just abandoned. um I carried that kind of feeling through. Unfortunately I didn't make a lot of work about it, but it just really reminded me, well, after I got to Philly in 2005, like really like some parts of Philadelphia like really reminded me of Detroit, because it has that same feeling of like abandoned buildings, and how much like wealth and prosperity they used to be, but now it's like um completely changed. So oh, there we go. So in 2012, apart from everything, I purchased um an old pickle factory in here in Philadelphia that needed to like have a lot of work done to it, like completely rehabbed pretty much, and that became my studio and my home where I live on top. Um and I moved to Fishtown, and then while I was living in Fishtown, you kind of saw all this like new construction going on, all this kind of like waste and kind of dumpsters everywhere that like um people were coming, buying houses, flipping them, and then selling them, and even with the sort of like the market crash of like 2008, still things were, things in Philly moved. Maybe they didn't move quite as fast as they are now, or they were before, but things were happening. And I became really interested in doing a project with all the materials that I could find and that was left over. So um, Little Berlin was an artist-run gallery space, in a space called Viking Mills, which is now being turned into condos. Viking Mills was a big warehouse that housed a lot of artist studios. And right next to it, there was this big empty lot where there was a church and it had been demolished. And Angela McQuinlan, is that right? Deirdre, maybe, I don't know. So she was organizing this sort of like public space, large installation, large sculptures in this like kind of like abandoned lot that she got permission to use. So I went around and like I would my afternoons I would collect discarded like pieces of wood from all sorts of places that I would find around the city, and like sort of like constructed like the silhouette of a row home. And being this idea that we are sort of like talking about like reclamation, like talking about sort of what's lost and what's like being redone, like that we have to like kind of remember like the symbol of the row home in Philadelphia is very strong. Like I think it's one of the biggest identities that Philadelphia has, but also that they keep being like kind of demolished around here, and then these like weird, really ugly buildings kind of start getting being put up by developers that are just trying to like make as much profit as they can and trying to fit as many people as they can into a small lot. But yeah, this was sort of my first attempt at like kind of voicing my opinion about that in a sculptural form.
How tall was that? Was that your height?
That was about at the peak was about like 11 feet.
Okay. That's fine.
And then all the way to the right is about 10 feet. And it's kind of an exaggerated form of a row home, but
Yeah.
but
like that.
yeah, hopefully. And then later on, what happened was there was actually a community garden built around it, so vines would be growing up around it. Unfortunately,
that's cool.
I don't have any pictures, but yeah, I was really happy about that actually. And Angela had like organized a like this group of people that like started like community gardens, and they built rain collection barrels and everything. It was like really amazing. And then of course like 5 years later this whole area becomes homes for people. So um in some ways it's kind of good that like homes are being built, and in some ways like it's kind of sad that like a public space for the community is kind of lost. So it's it's bittersweet. Here's kind of a close-up of what it was to just like kind of cut pieces of wood and piece them together. And
So
that's
where
sort
did
of
you get your woodworking experience? Was that through art school or like side jobs? Just
a friend of
growing
mine.
up?
I would help friends frame houses or like
Yeah.
frame parts of their studios or just things like that, just kind of learning on my own. And I think I was wrong. I think it's like 10 feet at the tallest part, and this looks like it was probably 7 feet up here, or 6 feet up here. It's been a while. I think it was because we had to like dig into this ground and put these like 4x4
Right, that was like 10
pillars.
feet to the, what's in the ground. Yeah, yeah,
Exactly, yeah, it's been a while. So
yeah.
also I don't recommend like if it was, it was the middle of summer, and if you see in the background of the first image you kind of see all these tools. It was my friend and I in like July, hot as heck, and we were like out there with pickaxes like trying to dig into rocks pretty much. Don't recommend it, but it was a fun learning experience. um so moving forward, like this idea of like sustainability and looking at sustainability and what that means came has been sort of creeping in my mind, and lately even more. Uh as in like, do we have enough houses to sustain like the population that we have here? Is it affordable? Is it are we building the houses that are like that are going to be like energy wise? Are they going to be whatchamacallit, like uh well, not sustainable, but like efficient enough that we're not overusing, we're not depending on coal power and gas power and all that. So um those were all kind of things that were starting to like plant the seed in my brain back then. um but on a side note, like in 2006 I applied to do a residency at the Recycled Artist in Residence program, and the rare program is super awesome. It's a you have to apply, and if you get in you work in basically a trash site.
And it's still going on today, right?
It sure is, yeah.
Yeah.
Let me see if this video
Yeah,
can,
it's like, yeah, you work with garbage. No.
yeah. So it's at a waste management site. They take materials, and then whatever they can recycle they try to recycle and minimize the minimize the impact that it has on the landfill. The waste management site is called Recovery Revolution. Here's a little video of what it's like. So you kind of work in this big area, trash containers, like sort of like what's on the right here, kind of they come in, they dump a bunch of stuff, and we found that like a lot of materials from clean outs of houses would come through, and I started picking those out. um but I have this kind of neat video of like the experience of what it's like being there. So I started grabbing all the materials I could find that were like domestic or pop culture references, and
You found those at the garbage site, they're rare?
those are all from there. Yep. And my intention was to make a sort of like three-dimensional sculpture installation kind of thing, but fortunately the people at Taller Puerto Riqueño, they were just moving into a new space, and they had this beautiful new gallery. And so I was invited to do one of the first exhibitions there. I think it was like the third one. And I was like, oh, great, I have this residency. I was in talks with the people at Taller, and I was like, I can marry the two and make these two organizations sort of like help each other out, or not help each other out, but at least, you know, have some sort of like convergence. Anyways, it all worked out. It's super cool. You know, you find things like this, like these Smokey the Bear stamps. This was the work area that I had, and my intentions were to like grab all these things, paint them kind of in this white house paint color, and then end up photographing them. So as I move forward, I shot this on film, on slide film, on large 4x5 slide film. And this was just a test, and I thought it was kind of interesting that once you kind of see the sky behind it, you can kind of see the just like kind of like the landscape behind the materials that we kind of consume and throw out. But these were what the eventually what the final images look like. And the whole idea is to just be like a bunch of noise, a bunch of materials kind of thrown in together into one frame, and one person could get lost. Like, these prints are supposed to be very large, and as you stand there, first of all, like everything that's in there is like kind of blown up, so that it's larger than life, but then you can kind of like get lost in all the sort of crazy noise. And this was the installation at the space. So it had these 8 images, and then when you turn around, there was actually a space to hang all these objects. And then I included some other works that I had done in the past of like where I photographed these objects painted black, and you get kind of this like back and forth of kind of like the noise of it all, and then sort of like the tropes of each like symbol of object. So there's like they're kind of like youth and wisdom, and that's what they were all named. Moving along, since in 2021 I got invited to do a project with the oh, I'm forgetting the name now, but they it's a group that's rehabbing the river wards, or the riverside in Philadelphia, and they're taking this old cement plant that's in Bridesburg, and Bridesburg is a very interesting kind of community, since it's surrounded by 95. You've got the bridge here. I think that's the Betsy Ross, and then one of the oldest armories in the United States. So there's like a historical component to it. There's a lot of industrial like plants there that like make different chemicals, and there used to be a coking plant there, which actually environmentally like destroyed the ground, and it's become a super fun site. But so where you see the square, I don't know if you can see my mouse, probably not, but where you see the square right to the north of that is where the coking plant was, but where the cement plant was, they're going to build a public space area, which is kind of nice because Bridesburg doesn't have a way to get to the river. So I had permission to get on the grounds and make some photographs of the space. And you can kind of see where the cement pour out was, and that like meets up right into the river. But one of the cool things was like the amount of nature that was kind of reclaiming the area was kind of great. So you saw like these beaver marks, you saw sort of like trees growing through like these like wrought iron pieces, you know, small probably invasive species of of plants kind of coming up through the concrete. You know, the background of the that's the Tacony Bridge, not the that's
Great.
Ross Bridge. Yeah. Then someone carved their name Dave on this piece of concrete there. Then I had a chance to like walk through the Superfund site, the Cokies, it's called Cokies Plants. And you saw like deer hooves, the skull that we found, this car that's just sitting in the mud. So it's kind of sad, it's kind of wild that it's like, how did this car even get here, in a place that's, you know, fenced off, it's not really accessible. It's pretty wild. So there's a lot of talk about what to do with the space. Back in 2021, they didn't know yet. They were having a lot of meetings. But the what was kind of nice that the project, after I made the photographs, I was we spoke with local businesses, and they allowed us to put the images up on their windows as part of the project. And it was a way for it was a Delaware River, and I'm forgetting the last two words, sorry. But it's a way for them to kind of reach out to the community and say, like, here's some artwork, this is the project that's coming up, we just want to make you aware. And I started taking more pictures around Bridesburg that I thought I was going to use for the project, but it ended up being for something else. And you know, I found that it's really important. Well, at least for me, I found that as a project, it was like really nice to start documenting the community around you and what you're doing. Because there's so many like kind of like great things about doing a project like this in the long term. And that goes back to what your assignment will be. So like this is one of the images I took, where you have all these homes, and then like right at the end of the block there's like a big chemical plant. And talking to some of the people in the community, they were talking about like, oh yeah, in the 80s there was a big fire, and you know, that's when we had to put in like air raid sirens, because if there's ever an accident, it's really hard to get out of this like little corner of Philadelphia. There's only like really 2 streets in, and if those are blocked, you're kind of stuck. And point no point is a reference to the area, because if you go back to the map, trying to keep in time, okay, this little corner here where the bridge meets the river, apparently it's called Point No Point, and it's been called that since like the 1700s, because as you're going up, going from the river, you kind of see a point, you think it's like an outlet point, but then as you get closer, it's not a point. So Bridesburg used to be called Point No Point. And I thought that was just funny. And also this is the Republican headquarters for Bridesburg, and the fact that it's in the Point No Point building is just humorous to me too. Anyways, that leads me to Fishtown Daily, and kind of the longest working project that I've been doing lately. So I'm all over the place. I do installation, I do sculpture, but I think I mostly do photography work or photography based artwork. And Fishtown Daily was a project that kind of started in 2008, where I started taking pictures with while I was walking my dog around my neighborhood of Fishtown. And it wasn't, I didn't have a purpose to it other than just like, as a photographer, it was like more like muscle memory. It's just more like, if I don't keep photographing, I'll remain stagnant. So I just kept doing it. And then after a few years, I was like, oh, I have like a collection here. Now a lot of the earlier stuff I don't show as often, because it's not as good as the later work, but you can yeah, you could kind of tell how like things change. So this was in 2018. Obviously it was very like difficult time politically, but you can see like how things are changing, and it's kind of nice to have this like kind of archive or this document where I can go back and be like, oh yeah, 2018 was pretty wild. I love finding images like this where it's like idealized painted landscapes on in front of buildings. You know, the way that people use potted plants in front of their buildings, and then you know juxtapose that with like these weeds that are like growing in the back of someone's pickup truck. During 2020, you know, you saw a lot of like kind of uh, you know, people passing away, or the way they were celebrating like birthdays, where it was just, you know, all new to everyone, I guess. And what was kind of nice was like as I woke up, like I would wake up in the morning and like go photograph, and if it's, the streets were empty, I just kind of felt like I had the place to myself. I didn't feel self-conscious or anything. Um, this was a there were some bowls of water and cat food, and it's just a little shelter for cats that I found. Um, you know, and I'm not trying to make like the most. I mean, there. I feel like there's a pretty light and there's a beautiful like sense to them, but they're not, you know, like the most prettiest pictures of like Philadelphia. You know, yeah. There's obviously a houseless population um in Philly, and they've kind of like taken camping out into anywhere they can. Um, you know, in the background, there's this cathedral here called St. Laurentius that has been going on for about 5 or 6 years. They've been trying to keep it, and it wasn't until a few months ago that it started being demolished. So you know, photographing like the new construction, and then you'll see later on how all this whole building got burnt down because the developers lost the funds to finish the project, and then it got burnt down, and then it just ended up in these ruins. So right, like people's birthdays, you know, activists doing a lot of work on the streets, people sleeping out in the parks. This is the St. Laurentius church being torn down. This was earlier this year. Here's that same building, like totally demolished. There's the cathedral. And, you know, mixing it up a little bit of like, this was in Chinatown. So yeah, that leads me to other artists and influences. Since I only have a few minutes, I'm going to go through pretty fast. So New Topographics was this exhibition, like I said, at the George Eastman House International Museum of Photography. It included works by Robert Adams, Louis Baltz, Bernard Hillebecker, not Frank Godlike, Frank Golke, Nick Nixon, John Scott, Stephen Shore, and Henry Wessel. And I apologize for the bad reproductions, but this was Joe Deal's work, and Joe Deal, he photographed, like I said, all these, a lot of these photographers, other than the Beckers, maybe Nick Nixon, Stephen Shore, they worked out west, in American West, and Joe Deal was photographing sort of new construction of like suburbs. And if you see a lot of his photographs, there's not really a sky, everything's pointed down. And it's sort of the new construction. He's very critical about how things are built and how things look. Like, for example, this house has like lawn, the way that the house has like this like green lawn around the arid sort of like landscape, which now we know has, you know, like they're suffering a big drought. Maybe not this year, but they've been suffering a big drought for the past 5 years or more. In this image, there's like a big plot here that's been just like carved out. This is Frank Golke's work, and I'm going to get into Frank Golke in a later segment. This is Nick Nixon's work, and Nick Nixon made these aerial shots of different cities. So you kind of see from a different vantage point. Louis Baltz did a lot of work in industrial parks that were being built in the 70s, and he actually hang on. When you're making this kind of work, like there's a sense of beauty to it, like there's an abstract like sense of making this work very like beautiful and painterly, but the theme is kind of it's a little harsh, it's a little like it's a little rough to take in, like how, you know, the natural part is only like segmented into this like little area here between the parking spots. um the Beckers were this couple from Germany, and I think they were the only foreign artists invited into this show. And they were photographing these industrial buildings in with like in a movement called like a typology, or like kind of like trying to classify one thing and photographing it over and over again. So you see in their series, they're all like photographing either from different angles, or these are different places that look the same. um uh Next is Catherine Opie, who does a lot of work with gender identity, and but also landscape documentary work, and a lot of it has to do with politics. um I only bring her up for her free, I mean, all of her work is amazing, but her freeway works, I wanted to bring that up because she went out and photographed these panoramas of the LA freeways, and then had them printed on platinum prints, which are it's an alternative style of printing photographs, which leaves it like this kind of soft, you know, little bit low contrast, but it's reminiscent of these like earlier Western photographers, or these photographers photographing the landscape in the 1800s. And you could kind of see that like when, and I'll show some later on. um it's reminiscent of like being in the cliff and photographing like the sublime nature of things, but through the man-made highway. I thought it was really fascinating. And especially if you see her other work, it's completely different, like, you know, it's like portraits of queer of queer population. And she's just awesome. This book, Robert Adams' What We Bought, The New World, is probably my most favorite book, and it's like the book that has influenced me the most. So Robert Adams is a photographer. um and I think this is his first kind of his first book. Excuse me. He had a background in English or in literature, and but he also, you know, he knows how to like compose a photograph really amazingly. In this book, the way it's like sequins and photograph is just really nice. So it starts off with these like kind of like vistas of landscapes, and everything isn't it's kind of shot in these like contrasty light. um but you have so you start with the landscape, you start going into like these areas with billboards and buildings, you know, you see the remnants of the, like, the construction. And as you go in, you start getting more into the metropolitan area of Denver. um and um and you start getting into the businesses, you go through the highways, you see the tract housing, you see the cul-de-sacs, and then you go into like the business, like the actual like industry part of it, and they're building some sort of satellite situation here, into the office, then into the shopping centers, the mega marts, this lonely girl sitting in front of these like commercial areas, the supermarket, the lonely person eating inside like probably a Kmart or Walgreens. And then you come out and it's like getting closer to dusk, and you see these sort of like um same kind of architecture, um you're zooming back out, it's getting darker at night, photographs at night, people out on their lawn at night, and then ends with this poem. It's like, on the last day of the world, I would want to plant a tree. What for? Not for the fruit. The tree that bears the fruit is not the one that was planted. I want that tree that stands in the earth for the first time, with the sun already going down and the water touching its roots, in the earth full of the dead and clouds passing one by one over its leaves. The pond is another great example of like photographing like something in your community or in your area. John Gossage was commuting. He lives in Massachusetts, or he lived in Massachusetts during this time. And he would pass by this pond area that was like gated off, and he just became interested in it and just took his camera and started walking and photographing it. And it's a really great example of where man meets nature, and what happens. This book was published in 1985, and it was really kind of radical for it. Like, it seems really weird, like that. It looks kind of banal and kind of normal, but it caused a lot of like stir, because it was someone that was being critical about nature. And apart from that, it was near where Walden Pond is, Henry David Thoreau's uh Walden Pond, where it's like all about the beauty of nature, like, you know, people like going back to the land. And John Gossage took a very critical look at that. Accommodating Nature, the photographs of Frank Golke, was an exhibition at the Smithsonian Institute, American Art Museum. And it starts with this image of in Ohio, of this like I guess like a lookout that's all frozen over. The exhibition, or at least the book, was kind of broken down into different themes, like beginning from his like area of his home, of where he grew up, and then going all through America. And there's these sequences here of like how the kind of like landscape changed. This image here is of Mount St. Helens, before, I think it was before it erupted. And then he went back and photographed the same image after a landslide. And they're in the book, they're next to each other. So you kind of see the difference. Last but not least, American Geography is a great book that covers like landscape photography, from a dozen of like from all over, and from 1840s and forward. So the cover has a Stephen Shore book, and Stephen Shore would photograph around the United States, making these really beautiful compositions using light, using an 8x10 camera. But I wanted to get into a couple of people that were in the book. Carlton Watkins was one of these photographers in the mid 1800s that went out and photographed the land before it became they became national parks, and before like man started changing everything. Carlton Watkins had like really interesting past. You know, he was a 50-year-old that married his assistant, who was 22, which is a little icky, but his work was copied and used by other people without his permission. So he made these like amazing photographs, but he died penniless. In 1906, so all this work is made on glass negatives and then printed. But in 1906, an earthquake hit San Francisco and destroyed all his work. So to find a print of his is pretty amazing, and to find an original print would be pretty amazing. But he's someone to really look into more. And again, like, think about those Kathy Opie photographs in comparison to this, where, you know, she used that kind of tone of like looking at or printing the landscape versus I mean, to use that platinum printing process to like emulate this kind of idea of an older process. Frank J. Haynes is another kind of Western landscape photographer. He was the official photographer for Yellowstone and the Pacific Railway. Walker Evans, very well-known photographer, who photographed during the Great Depression. And what I wanted to point out here more than anything is like his ability to create a whole story, a whole narrative in one image. So in this image, you kind of have here in the foreground, like people living in these houses. You have the river, you have the train tracks crossing where they would go into the industrial part of town, and then the rest of the town in the background. And you can make these like narratives. This is in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, where you have in the foreground your graveyard. In the middle on the right, you have people's homes. On the left-hand side, you have where people would go and shop for their things. And then on the background, you have the steel mill. And this is all representative of life in the for Bethlehem. You know, this is the circle of life in one image. And I think lastly, Mitch Epstein, more contemporary, doing kind of a similar thing, but this work called American Power came out of 9/11. After 9/11, there was a lot of people securing down America's power infrastructure. So he has a lot of photographs of that, but he also has a lot of photographs of like the areas around the power plants. And it's kind of just showing like what the impact is of American power in our daily lives. This was after Hurricane Katrina, I believe. And you see these destroyed oil rigs. This was an oil refinery in New Orleans. This was in Mississippi after Katrina. Yeah, sorry, I'm just rushing because I know we're almost out of time. But the last three photographers that I wanted to mention was Mark Klett, The Half-Life of History, did a whole series about sort of the testing of the nuclear bomb and the areas of where they were tested. Corinne Vermeulen did a beautiful series on Detroit and the people around Detroit, called Your Town Tomorrow. And then Steve Smith did a whole book about sort of like houses in Utah. Maybe there's like way too much here. These last links, let me see if open link. And if I stop sharing, share again. Any questions?
Awesome. Wow, that was great. That was like
Yeah, there's like so much to talk about
on you and on the history of photography. Wow, thank you so much.
Yeah. So I think looking back, maybe I could have cut some.
Awesome. Yeah, keep firing through your images. Do you guys have questions for Jaime? I know you guys have prepared some, so shout them out. So thinking about the project that we're going to be doing, where we're going to actually go and photograph around campus, but we're going to photograph in Bethlehem as well. I think that one of the questions that I might have is what when you are doing your walkabouts, around Fishtown, like, and you were saying like your muscle memory, you wanted to kind of exercise that muscle memory. Can you kind of like unpack that or flesh that out a little bit? Like so when you're walking around, you've got your dog, in one hand, you got your camera in the other. What are you looking for? Because these guys are going to be looking for climate change in their backyard. So like, can you give them like just some little nuggets of wisdom?
Sure. So I think something like a sort of mistake that I did, and I think it would help to not do that. Not really a mistake, but more like when I went out photographing, I went out kind of blind and not photographing with intention. So I had a lot of stuff and it's hard to piece it all together. I think have have a list of things you want to photograph and find that, and then do it over and over again. I think one thing that helps is like repetition or finding the same thing to photograph. It's hard to do it, I think, for your assignment because you have a limited time, but if you can find something, photograph it, and then like wait a couple of weeks and photograph it again, and then another 2 weeks and photograph it again. Not only will you photograph it differently, things in that space will change, things in that space will like evolve, and then it starts, like, you start seeing the progression of time. But I think most importantly, at least for this assignment, like kind of really stick to like an idea, like think about your idea, maybe take a walk, take notes of like the few things that you want to do, and then like concentrate on one or two of those things. um I when I go out photographing, it's really open for me, but like finding sort of like tropes in my photography, like plants and the way they live, are one thing, like in these two images. When I find like a scene like this where it's like it's sort of an altar to someone, I always stop. But at least for as per your assignment, yeah, definitely take a look at what have that one thing in mind and then keep going and finding it again. Yeah.
Awesome. Good advice. And can you talk to us about what you're going to be in a show, right? Coming up in Philly?
Yeah. So
When is that? And like, what's it about?
I there's gonna be a couple of shows. So the consumption work is gonna be shown at past present gallery, I think in starting in May.
It's called
So
Consumption.
this is different. This is the consumption work, the work I did from the Rare residency.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's gonna be, some of this work is gonna be up in a whole show about residencies. And then In Liquid had asked me to do some work based on sustainability, and they chose 3 artists to sort of talk about or sustainability in Philadelphia, the past, the present, and the future. So I was asked about to react to the future of it. I'm slowly working on putting that together, but I'm not, it's gonna be open sometime this summer, so I'll have to pass that on.
And then how will the students find out about your shows? Like, can you
Sure.
shout out your Instagram so these
Yeah.
guys can follow? You should follow
At,
Jaime, right?
yeah, at Instagram, at Jaime Photo .79. Here, I'll put it in, or not dot at Jaime Photo 79. Oh, okay. Jaime, here, I'll just put it on the thing.
Because you have your Fishtown Daily, right? That's like
Yeah,
one.
so there's 2 ways to follow me. Fishtown Daily, which Fishtown Daily has been a little quiet lately because I've been so busy with other things.
Teaching life, yeah.
Yeah, but at Jaime Photo 79 is probably where you'll find more of everything. Yeah. I post there quite a bit, ups and downs. But those are the 2 main places, only on Instagram.
Okay, cool. So do you guys have questions for Jaime before we have to let him go and let you guys do your work? Nothing?
No. Okay.
Anybody on screen?
If you have any questions, I mean, you feel free to email me, Jaime at Jaime Photo.
Awesome. Well, one of the things, you're like, just, I guess on ending note, the Bethlehem, thank you for that Walker Evans image of Bethlehem, right? And it is, as Stacy said in the chat, it's actually up at LUAG Gallery. So we're gonna do
cool.
a field trip. Yeah, that was so perfect, Jaime.
Oh,
So
that's
we're
awesome.
gonna do a field trip and go to the gallery to see that. But when we do our photojournalist walkabout on campus and then we're going to go to the steel stacks and we're going to visit that Walker Evans site. And these guys are going to look for like, garbage around the cemetery or a plastic bag in the tree or like evidence of climate change. And we'll be able to compare and contrast your documenting of the site to Walker Evans from when was that, like 19, I don't even know,
38, I
like
think 35 or 38.
in
I'm
the
not sure.
30s or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that'd be cool. And we'll send you their documentation of the site. How about
Yeah,
that?
that'd be awesome. I'd love to
Would
see
that be
it.
cool?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And then you
Yeah.
got to come out and visit us. You can do a walkabout with us and
Yeah,
you know,
definitely.
do a little Bethlehem daily. Add to your
Yeah,
Bethlehem daily.
exactly. Yeah, I haven't been there in a while, but yeah, I would love to be there. Yeah, let me know.
Awesome.
Mhm.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jaime, for this amazing lecture and art history lesson. That was awesome.
Sure.
Um,
Thank you.
And we'll follow you and
Mhm.
and look forward to seeing your exhibitions this summer for sure.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I'll let you all know. Mhm.
Awesome. All right, Stacy, you good?